Well, I thought I would jumpstart this YouTube channel by giving you a little bit of background about who I am and how it is that I came to be here in this position where I am speaking to you now. My name is Paul Jansen. I spent the better part of a decade working in the holistic health field as an acupuncturist and transitioned from there into the world of cognitive science. I went back to school to get a degree in cognitive studies and education. This was an applied graduate degree at Teachers College at Columbia University, where the focus was on intelligent technologies. It was the track that I was on. So it was really all about learning how to optimize digital learning environments for learning. So skill acquisition, learning optimization, behavior modification, that was kind of the name of the game, like atomic habits, deliberate practice. That was really at the heart of what I was studying. And other deep dives that I want to just share with you here include some time I spent in India and Nepal. This was a 7-month period of time that was really informative and established, really important period of my life. Yeah, it was a really important period of my life, and yeah. What's the word? Yeah, all right, so my one person. All right, so I wouldn't have stopped if this person was here, right? Would I have stopped if this person was here? No. I would have kept on going. This was really important. Yeah, so other deep dives in my life experience worth sharing here. I did spent a good chunk of time, about 7 months in my 20s in India and Nepal. This was a really impactful period of my life. Okay, so all right. So I thought I would jump on here, jumpstart. All right, so this is my person. Yeah. So I thought I would, oh, don't do that. Don't kick it. So I thought I would jumpstart this new YouTube channel by giving you a bit of background about who I am and how it is that I got to be here in this position talking to you right now. My name is Paul Jansen. I spent the better part of a decade working in the holistic health field as an acupuncturist and shifted gears from there to go back to school. I studied cognitive science. It was a cognitive studies program in education at Teachers College at Columbia University. So it was kind of an applied cognitive science program focusing on digital learning environments and how to optimize learning in digital learning spaces. So this was learning optimization, skill acquisition, deliberate practice was a big area of study of mine. And other arenas that I've played in that are worth noting here include a 7-month period of time that I spent in India and Nepal. I got deeply interested in Eastern mysticism and spent some solid time studying with some great teachers at some great places that really had a powerful impact on me during that period of my life. I spent a couple of years after that back in the States living with and studying with my teacher here. And also got really interested in somatics for a period of time. It was actually the reason I chose the master's program at Teachers College was because the advisor who I ended up working with, John Black, was one of the early pioneers in embodied cognition. So this idea of embodiment and somatics was always something that was really interesting to me. But I found a somatics approach called the Feldenkrais method, and got really fascinated with this, and studied for a couple of years, did a teacher trainer program in New York City. And that was definitely something that was very formative in terms of my thinking. I also got into performance psychology and flow science a little bit more recently. I did a coaching certification program through the Flow Research Collective on flow science. And currently, I am a working musician and working on getting this project, Create or Perish, off the ground. So that's my bio. That's the story. That's the public-facing story. That's kind of the polished CV, that you're supposed to tell. But I want to tell you a different story. One of the things that I have realized in this work that I want to do is that I need to pull from a deeper place. I need to speak from a deeper place in order to connect to you listening in a deeper place. And so the story I want to tell you is kind of the backstory, or the understory, you could call it, behind what I just shared with you. And the long and the short of it is that during each of these chapters of my life where I was, doing the things that I was just sharing with you, I was really struggling on the inside. I was not really living in alignment with who it was that I wanted to be in the world. And I had a tremendous amount of anxiety, a tremendous amount of self-doubt, and just a lot of tension and discomfort about where I was in life, where I was in relationship with what I was doing in my life. And that was actually the primary motivation behind all of the things that I just shared with you. So Chinese medicine, to me at the time, was something that I thought, if I really pursued it diligently, would be able to help me resolve these issues. And after many years of very dedicated involvement in receiving acupuncture and doing qigong practices, Chinese herbs, all of the things that one does, I found myself still struggling. And that's when I got interested in spirituality. And the whole premise of Eastern mysticism was very persuasive to me. And it was very fruitful in a lot of ways. It was a really important time in my life, and continues to be something that shapes my understanding of the world and so forth. But in terms of having an impact on the things that I was struggling with, it didn't really move the needle in any significant way. And likewise with cognitive science and performance psychology and philosophy and psychology in general, all of these things that I've delved into never really shifted me into the gear that I needed to shift myself into. And even though it looked on paper as though I was doing well, the reality was that the things that I was aspiring to do, the things that I really wanted to do, the things that, would rise up inside as this kind of, creative inspiration. So, for example, starting a Feldenkrais class. That was something when I was doing the Feldenkrais method that I attempted to start. And I started it, and it just fizzled out almost as quickly as it began. And, this held true with the entrepreneurial endeavors that I took on after getting my degree. That was the whole plan, was go back to school, get a degree, start a business based on what I had learned. And both of those businesses just never were able to get off the ground. And I've tried my hand at a number of online courses and just other projects, being consistent online with social media, with various things that I've tried to do, starting a Substack, starting another YouTube channel. And, that's the somewhat less glamorous story behind the story that I shared with you. And, the challenges that I faced, a lot of it has to do with attention deficit disorder. I was diagnosed with ADD as a kid, and had a lot of anxiety, performance anxiety, and that's one of the things that really held me back with my music, was really debilitating performance anxiety, and just a lot of self-doubt, self-sabotage, procrastination, perfectionism, the whole laundry list of ways in which we can self-sabotage. And it was just insurmountable. Every time I tried to get something off the ground, it just failed. And it was very clear to me throughout all of these attempts that I was the limiting factor. There was no lack of resources. I had everything that I needed. Certainly had all of the information. That was the ultimate irony of where this landed me, was that I had all of these frameworks, I had all of these maps that I had pretty deep knowledge in, and I wasn't able to get to where I wanted to go. Like I knew all of the things, but I wasn't able to unlock the way forward into actually realizing those things, actualizing those things, becoming self-actualized, as Maslow would say. And so, this really instilled in me this fundamental principle that is, that information is not transformation. Just knowing something doesn't mean that it's actually going to change how you are showing up, change the nature of your life, change the situation that you're in. And this is so incredibly true, especially now, given the information age that we're living in, where we're just bombarded with information, overloaded with information, realizing that the knowledge isn't enough to actually bring about change. So for me, the transformation, the real breakthrough began about 8 years ago, after a series of MDMA and psychedelic experiences opened my eyes to the fact that a significant amount of the tension and resistance and inhibition that I was experiencing was rooted in childhood trauma. And I'd always been somewhat of a trauma denier in the sense that I'd been very persuaded by people who I thought very highly of, had a lot of respect for, people in my family, people in my social circles, people that I was tapped into in, say, the world of Stoicism and Stoic philosophy, which would kind of summarize this as the experiences that you have aren't the things that impact you. It's your interpretation of those experiences. So essentially, it's the story you tell about your life experience that really matters. So I had decided to tell myself a particular story, and that is definitely good advice, and there's definitely a reality to that. But unfortunately, it's not the entire reality. The fact of the matter is that there is a biological component, a psychobiological component, a nervous system component. And for some people, there is a very deeply imprinted memory, if you will, of past experience that gets locked into the nervous system. And this was the thing that I just came to see as clear as day. It was my first MDMA experience, actually, that kind of clued me into this. And it was just revelatory. It was like, oh my God, the state of frozenness in my body is identical. It is one and the same as the state of frozenness in my childhood that I experienced. And I don't want to get into all the details of my early childhood here, but I'll just very quickly summarize the after effects of that. So when I was very young, I was in a lot of gifted programs. I was at the Math Science Center. It was like a magnet school for kids who showed aptitude with math and science. I was pretty gifted with music, showed a lot of potential with music as well, came from a good family. And as my story unfolded, I ended up running with the wrong crowd, ended up getting into trouble, dropped out of high school when I was 11, in 11th grade, and ended up finding myself in jail about a half a dozen times, ended up doing a little bit of time. And it wasn't until I was 18, after this little stint that I did, that I was able to kind of shake that off and get myself back on track. I got completely obsessed with Aikido. I found the martial arts. That was kind of my way out of the predicament I had found myself in. And just threw myself into that world and was doing classes about 6 days a week. The family who ran the dojo took me in. My teacher was an acupuncturist. That was what got me into Chinese medicine. And that's what kind of got me on the right track, so to speak. But again, it was like, on paper, I was on the right track. And from the outside looking in to the people in my life, my family, my friends, they were certainly relieved that I had gotten my act together. But, on the inside, it was just, things were not quite right. So this experience 8 years ago was really the catalyst that unlocked the initial kind of floodgates and started me off on about a 2-year period of healing and trauma work and just, understanding what that was all about and ultimately working through it and releasing it. And that led to deepening in my own connection to myself. This is something that I've really come to understand through the lens of integrity. So you talk a lot in these circles around healing and psychedelics and trauma work around integration. So it's this idea that you're really kind of making yourself more whole. You're bringing the fragmented parts of yourself back into conversation with each other, back into relation with each other, and you're bringing yourself back into wholeness, back into health. So health, wholeness share the same root. Integration, integrity shares the same root with integer, which is all about being an indivisible whole. So that's where this idea of living in integrity really started to take shape for me. And this idea of integrity has really become kind of my core value. And so as this integrity began to deepen during this process, the relationship I was in, it became very clear, was just not tenable. This was a woman I had married. We had gotten together when things were still as they were in the before times. And, it was just this imperative that I find my way out of what was an incredibly unhealthy relationship and into a life for myself that was actually in alignment, in integrity. And so that was a major decision. It was definitely the hardest decision I've ever made and one of the hardest periods of my life. It was a couple of years ago now that I made that jump, and it took about a year to get my feet back under me and get my bearings and just kind of get resituated. So, this particular leg of the journey began for me about 12 months ago. And in these past 12 months, I have really invested heavily in myself. I decided to tackle the performance anxiety. That was the first thing that I kind of took on. I started doing open mics, ended up doing about 30 open mics, and just pushed myself into the fire. And I'd seen some cracks in the wall that had been keeping me from performing after some of this healing started to transpire, and some more comfortability. Started to see some fresh opportunities with respect to my relationship with performance. And so I jumped into it and worked through it, and am now working as a musician. Started getting some paid gigs, and am now working towards building a viable income stream from performance. I also, almost 12 months to this date right now, today, I enlisted the help of a coach, and jumped into a 6-month high-touch coaching container with this incredible business coach. He's become a personal friend of mine, and it was an absolutely incredible experience that completely transformed my understanding of what it meant to do the work, to start a business, in particular to start a purpose-driven business, a mission-driven business that is in alignment and integrity with who you are, what you're about, what you are here to do, what you're here to bring to the world, and then how to tie that into a delivery system, how to tie that into, actually showing up in the real world, not just in a world of ideas about what you want to make happen, but how to actually translate that into a viable business. So that was an incredible experience. I also jumped into another coaching. This was a community and cohort container that I'm still involved in. And this cohort community is all about helping musicians get higher paying gigs. So this was this realization that, swinging a hammer and doing odds and ends construction jobs, which was what I had kind of been doing, or driving a semi-truck, which was another job that I had been doing. Here I'm sitting with a couple of master's degrees and all this education, back to my point about information and transformation, not being equal. I realized I don't want to be doing construction work. I don't want to be driving a truck. Mad respect to people who do that work. I've met a lot of really incredible people who are providing for their families, and that's in alignment with their lives and with what they're doing. And again, mad respect for that line of work. I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity to lean on that for income during those periods of times. But I'm not interested in doing that work anymore. And so the possibility of being able to make some decent money and float the boat as I get Creator Parish off the ground was really appealing to me. So this has been another incredible experience, being inside now a group coaching container with a very capable coach, a very capable teacher, somebody showing the way. So yeah, that's been an incredible experience. I also invested in another cohort community container, very similar business model, with a vocal coach. So this was something that was really important to me, more for my personal goals with music, less of the business side of things, but more with what I wanted to do creatively with my music. So unlocking certain things with my voice was something that I was really wanting to figure out how to do. So I found this incredible program and jumped in and just finished it, actually. It was a really, really great experience. Again, a fantastic leadership and mentorship from the person who was running the program. And the other thing that I did was a 30-day talk to talk to camera challenge. So this was a 30-day challenge that was all about, getting comfortable doing this, essentially sitting across from a camera and being able to speak to it and be natural and just feel normal. So that was another really interesting experience that really brought me into a kind of an aha moment. All of these cohorts and coaching and community experiences in the past 12 months have helped me realize that not only is information not transformation, but transformation really requires some kind of relational container. The power of being in a relational context that's relatively high pressure, where there's some kind of urgency or some kind of expectation that is set by the nature of the container, where you have regular contact with people who are mentors, as well as people who are, students alongside you who are a couple of steps ahead of you, and then relationships with other students who are on the same level of you, kind of in the same cohort, and then eventually becoming a person who other people are looking up to, who you are now a couple steps ahead of. This relational context is absolutely, I think, essential in bringing about any kind of real transformation. And so this transition that I'm making in my own life of shifting into building a business that is a vocation, it's a calling, it's answering the call, this creative imperative, as I like to call it, where you have this voice, this thing that is calling to you, that's pulling at you, that's tapping you on the shoulder, punching you on the shoulder, saying, hey, you need to do this, right? Being able to answer that call and find a way to transition it and transform it into a viable business, something where you're actually creating value for other people such that they're willing to pay you for it. That is the path that I'm on, and realizing the power of this, that is what I'm looking to create here with Creator Parish. So this YouTube channel and the community, I've got a free community that I've just started in school. I welcome you to come and check it out and say hello over there. And podcasts that I've just started. I've got the first one recorded and we'll be going live here this week. I've got another interview scheduled on Thursday. This is intended to help you get a look under the hood, and myself to get a glimpse under the hood of the lives of people who have made this leap and taken their creative work to the next level and created a business of some kind around their creative work. What does it look like on the day-to-day? What was the transition like? What was it like when they were, for example, in their corporate job, grinding away at something that wasn't meaningful and significant to them, seeing that there was an opportunity, and then actually taking that opportunity? What did that look like? What does it look like on the day-to-day? My uncle has a saying that I really like. This is in respect to, amazing musical performances or any kind of incredible performance. He says, it's always what you don't see. Because on stage, or what you see when somebody's doing a YouTube channel or a podcast, or they're running a coaching business, or whatever the case may be, what you see oftentimes looks relatively effortless. What you don't see is all of the work, all of the trial and error, all of the failure, the understory, all of the moving parts that are involved in actually creating this vocational reality where the person is doing the work, creating the infrastructure, sustaining the infrastructure. What kind of systems are they using? What are their habits and routines? What is it like to be on the inside of that? That's what the Creator Parish podcast is really, intended to do, is to interview writers, solopreneurs, musicians, people who have created creative businesses, and getting some insight into what that's all about. So there's the podcast, there's the community, there's the development of the paid community. That is going to be a resource for people who want some extra support doing creative work. And then the cohort is going to be a container for people who are looking to make a real radical transformation in their lives. And this is especially important, I think, right now, because we are living in an era of incredible upheaval and weirdness and craziness. There is so much that seems to be shaking the very foundations of the world that we have become accustomed to up until now. AI being a big player in this. And so there's a lot of insecurity and a fear of instability that is just kind of floating ambiently in the background of a lot of people's lives. And I think there is a lot of change that we are about to be facing that is going to include changes in how people work and what work means for people and what work is going to be available to them. So, I think there is this dimension that is the creative imperative, this need, I think, that we have to live in alignment, to live in integrity with our calling, with our abilities, with this unique fingerprint that we have in terms of the offerings that we can bring to the world and the world that needs those offerings, and making a connection there. There's something that becomes, violated when we don't live in integrity in that way. There's something that becomes shut down. So I think there is this creative imperative, but I think there's also an imperative that may be imposed on a lot of people during this time because of AI or because of whatever other changes are going on in the economy, or the shifting of tectonic plates, as it were. And so, I think having resources for people to help them through that transition is absolutely, it's incredibly important. And, based on my experience, the struggle is really around a couple of different areas. The struggle on the one hand is about getting traction. It's about the ADD, self-sabotage, establishing systems, and actually, using the systems. This is really fundamental to the Creator Parish ethos, is this idea of organic productivity. So realizing that the systems or the routines are not there to be put up on some kind of a pedestal as though they were ends in themselves, but realizing that they serve an end. They serve the purpose of the work that we're doing. They serve the mission of the work that we're doing, which is to actually bring our goods to the market. It's about making an impact with people, which means that we are connecting with people. We're actually bringing the thing that we're doing to the people who are looking for the thing that we're bringing. And so the productivity tools or the systems that we use are not this top-down thing that we impose upon ourselves, expecting that the perfect system, is just going to solve all of our problems. A system is an ever-evolving living thing. I like to think of it as being like a trellis in a garden, where you're using it to support a plant that has some kind of fruits that you don't want to be on the ground. And so you shape the trellis so that it can support the plant in the particular ways that it needs the support, so that you can get the fruit harvested and take the fruit to the market. It's not about the trellis. It's about whether or not the trellis does the job that it needs to do, so that you can ultimately deliver and, ship the goods and get them where they need to go. So, it's these kinds of things that are incredibly important for people who struggle with things like ADD, or with the resistance that has become, a popular word in this space, Stephen Pressfield's idea of the resistance. And, the procrastination, perfectionism cycle, keeping the commitments that we make to ourselves, getting on a production calendar, and actually being able to keep with that calendar. I like to say time management isn't about managing time. Time management is all about self-management, right? Managing our systems, managing our calendar, managing the work that we're doing isn't about managing the work. It's not about managing the system. It's not about that. It's about managing ourselves, right? Which means that we have to become the kind of person who can do the work. We have to become the kind of person who can be consistent and show up consistently, right? So it's back to this transformation idea. And one of the beautiful things that I have found is that once you find that transformational possibility, right? You find the right container, you find the right kind of recipe and context to bring about that change. These maps that I was telling you about, all of these frameworks become incredibly powerful. I, as a holistic practitioner, am really big on a multi-perspectival take on problems. I think it's really important to look at it from a number of different perspectives. You got to be able to understand what the root cause is, what the root problem is, and then be able to very strategically, very skillfully approach that problem, realizing that taking a direct attack, a direct approach isn't always the way to go. In fact, it's rarely the way to go. Forcing the issue and expecting that you're going to get good results is not usually a viable option. So becoming a strategist, a holistic strategist, where you can look at things through the perspective of psychology, for example, and spirituality even, and prioritize the nourishment that is required to do this kind of work sustainably, not just sustainably, but authentically. You've got to find a way to kind of show up in a way where you're pulling from a place that people are going to relate to. And, that requires that if that is out of sync, if you're not filling your cup, that you have that be part of the system. It's got to be a part of the framework that you're working from, recognizing that from a holistic perspective, those things actually tie into, sitting down and having the time block that's dedicated to whatever task that you're trying to do, or having specific goals about what it is that you want to accomplish. So, this getting traction piece, and then getting momentum, and then finding the through line to actually make an impact, right? It's all about connection, really. It's about connecting to the people who are looking for you and actually being able to consistently show up in that way. So that's one arena of interest that I have with Create or Perish. The other is really around building a personal brand. And this ties into this time that we're living in right now, where things are in flux, things are shifting, the ground under our feet seems to be, not as stable as it used to be. And from a professional context, from a professional perspective, what I see happening is that we're continuing to shift away from the old model where your degree and your resume were really the main things that you needed to be successful and have a stable income and have a stable professional life. It used to be that you go to school and you get your degree, and then you get a job, and your job security lay in that job. You'd get your pension and you'd get your retirement, and you'd be good to go. That was how it used to be. And then things shifted to a much more fluid model where your job stability was really more around your CV rather than your resume. It was much more about your job experience. Your degree became less important. What was more important to employers was what you did in your last job. If you were in marketing, or if you were in sales, or if you were a developer, what did you do? What did your portfolio, what does your portfolio look like? And what does your job experience look like? So it wasn't really about finding the one company that was going to take you all the way home into retirement. It was about demonstrating over a period of, maybe a 2 to 5 year period at various companies, demonstrating that you can do the work that the next company that you're looking for is wanting to have. And I think the shift that we're looking at right now is even further away from this and into a place where your online presence and your personal brand becomes the thing that gives you your security. And I hear this all over the place. I'm hearing this in a number of different ecosystems, and it seems to be the way things are moving. And so getting online and having an online presence and getting comfortable being on camera, for example, being comfortable on social media. I'm somebody that hated social media. I was off social media for 10 years. And it was not a place that I was comfortable being. Certainly being on camera was not a place I was comfortable being. Just having a public-facing image or persona was not something that I was comfortable with or ever envisioned that I would be endeavoring to do. But here we are. And I think the unfortunate reality is that for a lot of people, that's going to be a necessity if they want to prioritize being viable in the coming decades as this tide is turning. So that's another area where I feel like I have a lot to offer, which is around making that transition between not being comfortable on camera, being incredibly uncomfortable on camera, having an identity that is convinced that there's no way you're ever going to get comfortable on camera, and making that transition. So whatever the unique thing is for your particular path, doing the work and figuring out how to create a personal brand and a personal presence, that's really what I'm bringing to the table with Create or Perish. And I'm very excited to be at this particular place where I've kind of crossed the Rubicon in a way. And I'm in a place where I can start giving back and helping other people through that transition in their own lives. I've known for as long back as I can remember that my mission in life was to help other people overcome the kinds of challenges that I've struggled with. I remember exercises that I would do. I'm sure you've done these exercises where it's like, who are you here to serve? What's the main thrust of the value that you want to bring? And doing these exercises, even in my 20s, it was like, I've got this helper kind of gene. I've always been somebody who's wanted to help other people. I've always had this proclivity towards trying to consolidate complicated ideas and make them understandable and actionable so that other people can implement them and make them useful in their lives. And so being able to be at a place now where I feel like I've got some momentum in my life. I've made some of these breakthroughs to be able to put this together into Create or Perish and offer some of these things to you, it's really an incredible feeling. And I'm very excited to continue showing up here on YouTube and continue showing up in the community. I'm very curious to know what you're struggling with right now. Are you in a place where you haven't really answered the call? You've been feeling a pull to jump into something, but you're wondering how or whether to make the jump? Or are you already in it? Are you already in the thick of it? You're already trying some things out. You've already started something, and you're struggling in some way to get traction or make connection with your audience. Or have you already started to find some momentum? Are you already in the mix and in the kind of vibe where you've actually made connection with the people that you're looking to connect with, and you're just looking for more clarity around how to optimize the things that really matter? Or perhaps you started something but you feel like you've lost touch with your own authentic core, and you don't really feel like you're pulling from the right place. Maybe it feels a little bit shallow. Whatever the case may be, please leave a comment down below. I'm going to answer all the comments that come in here, and jump into the community. Come check that out. It's just getting off the ground, and feel free to DM me there. I would love to hear from you in the Creator Parish School community. So thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate you being here, and I look forward to seeing you around the bend.